4th grade ELA text set 7, illustrator study Floyd Cooper. And for the author's messages from story events, that's the read aloud goal. Today I'm going to read another book illustrated by Floyd Cooper. How does this book remind you of the other books we've read with illustrations by Floyd Cooper? This book is These Hands by Margaret H. Mason, based on the title, the cover, illustrations, and the other books we've read in this set. Do you have any guesses what this book might be about? Look at these hands, Joseph. Did you know these hands used to tie a triple bowline knot in 3 seconds flat? Well, I can still help a young fellow learn to tie his shoes. Yes, I can. Look at these hands, Joseph. Did you know these hands used to make these ivories sing like a sparrow in springtime? Well, I can show a young fellow how to play heart and soul. Yes, I can. So, ivories refer to the keys on the piano. Sorry. Look at these hands, Joseph. Did you know these hands used to pluck the ace of spades right out of thin air? Well, I can still teach a young fellow how to do a wonderful waterfall shuffle. Yes, I can. Who are the characters in this story? What can you tell about their relationship so far? Look at these hands, Joseph. Did you know these hands used to throw a curveball faster than a dive-bombing honeybee? Well, I can still help a young fellow learn to hit a line drive. Yes, I can. Look at these hands, Joseph. Did you know these hands were not allowed to mix the bread dough in the Wonder Bread factory? Did you know these hands were not allowed to touch the bread dough in the Wonder Bread factory? These hands were only allowed to sweep the floors and work at the line and load the trucks because the bosses said white people would not want to eat bread touched by these hands. So far, Grandpa has been telling Joseph about what his hands could do, but now he's telling Joseph that his hands weren't allowed to touch the dough at the bakery where he worked. What work was he allowed to do? Well, these hands joined with other hands, and we wrote our petitions, and we carried our signs, and we raised our voices together. Now my hands can mix the bread dough no matter their color. Now any hands can touch the bread dough no matter their color. Yes, they can. So Grandpa and other African American people were being discriminated against or being treated unfairly because of their race. How did they use their hands to fight discrimination? Look at these hands, Grandpa. These hands used to not be able to tie a shoe, or play the piano, or shuffle the cards, or hit the ball. Now I can do all that, plus bake a fine loaf of bread, can't I? Why, yes, you can, Joseph. Look at those hands. Those hands can do anything at all in this whole wide world. Yes, you can. So Grandpa responds to Joseph in the last page. What does he really mean? How does this connect to the message the author wants you to take away from this story? So I'm going to read the author's note. Not so long ago, during the 1950s and early 1960s, the African American workers at the Wonder Bread Array and Tasty Bakery for factories were allowed to sweep the floors, load the trucks, and fix the machines, but they were not allowed to work as bread dough mixers or bread dough handlers. I learned this history from Joe Barnett, an old friend and leader of one of the bakery labor unions, which are groups of workers that join together to fight for fair treatment in their jobs. Joe told me the story of one evening as we were driving to a Detroit Pistons basketball game, and I can still picture his hands gesturing and trembling in the crisscrossing glow of headlights. My husband, who is a labor union attorney, has also heard bakery union members talk many times over the years about these unwritten rules for African American workers. A lot of what we know about how people were treated in the past comes through the retelling of stories like Joe's oral history. Fellow Michigan and author Jean Alicia Elster remembers her mother telling her that African American women were not allowed to try on their hats in Hudson department store. The father of the first African American governor of New York's David Patterson remembers being paid by the people he worked for not to attend holiday parties in the 1940s. This history is shocking today, so many people But back then it wasn't news, it was just how things were. In fact, newspaper ads for jobs back then often mentioned whites only or no colored. Deciding what jobs people could do based on their skin color was not against the law until the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964. Before then, people may have thought such behavior was wrong, but they couldn't force other people to change. One day in 2006, a few years after Joe died, I was watching my daughter play the violin and thinking about hands. I thought of Joe's hands and also the heart, and I wrote down his story.